What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we're now a little more than 2 months away from a brand new Legend of Zelda game releasing, and now based on some new information from where else but a ratings board, we actually may see a bit of a twist on the game that we weren't originally expecting, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about what else but another major hack that's hit a big company, this time being Disney, and setting up the potential for a ton of information just gets spilled online. And then we also had an update on the next Crash Bandicoot game, and unfortunately for fans, it's not exactly great news. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps it a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with PCSX2, which is a storied and popular PS2 emulator, as it got its first big update or version update in years actually now. They posted this up over on their official account, where they said if you're using the nightly version, you may not notice much of a difference, but if you're on the stable 1.6.0 release, we're about to blow your mind. PCSX2 2.0 is now live. The update includes a new UI design, the assimilation of plugins, simplified configuration files, automatic game fixes, per game settings, big picture mode. They have improved translation support, and they also have Vulkan support, better sound, improved controller mapping, retro achievements, and they say much more. And the thing that's always impressed me about these PS2 emulators is how well they're able to clean up some of these games from 20 plus years ago now. The games look awesome in these different emulators, especially with PCSX, and now with this new 2.0 version. I do like the idea of big picture mode, a refined UI, and of course achievement support, and it looks like some graphical issues and glitches that were present in the previous version are fixed. So this is really cool stuff, and again, another reason to go back and revisit some of those old PS2 games with achievements and significantly better visuals and frame rates. Also, do you remember the Driver series with Ubisoft? I specifically remember Driver 2 blowing my mind back in the day on the PS1, because it was the first time I remember in a game like that, being able to get out of your car and then go steal another car and drive around. Well, Ubisoft did have plans to at least do something outside of games with the Driver series recently. Well, now it appears plans have changed, but we can see this post up by Steven Totillo, who says Ubisoft's live-action Driver series announced in 2021 is no longer going ahead at Binge, and the production company behind it has been shuttered. But Ubisoft promises it is actively working on other exciting projects related to the franchise. The last Driver was like Driver San Francisco, and that was more than a decade ago, which is wild to think it's been that long since we had a Driver game, although it wasn't exactly getting better and better with each release. So it kind of makes sense why maybe Ubisoft moved away from that, and of course focused heavily on things like Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't mind them revisiting the Driver series. And I guess that does kind of match up better even on like the big screen or on a series where you can sell it to an Amazon and Netflix, and they'll front a lot of that cost. But I do wonder if they could take another shot at a new Driver game at some point in the future. Oh, and here's something fun for Nintendo fans. We actually had a magazine release that typically be like handed out at a store in Japan, for example, like the Nintendo Tokyo store. Well, now you can see here, it's just available online, and they do have it translated to English, and this very much reminds me of like the Nintendo Powers that would release back in the day, of course being a bit more modernized here for 2024, but like you can go through and they have some fun inside information on different games, they have tips and tricks, and then they also advertise a lot as well. For example, like the release schedule coming up for the rest of this year into 2025. But it's kind of fun to have that there. It's free. You can just go on their website. Here, I'll have it linked down below in the sources, and just kind of click through and check out all the stuff they have. Based on the table of contents, though, it is more than 66 pages. So I guess technically someone could even print all of these out, staple them together, and there you go. You have a new age Nintendo Power that technically they hand out for free over in Japan, but there you go, they at least released it here now digitally in English. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. It is coming out September 26th, so again, 2.5 months away, and I'm very interested in this game because it's just a whole different take on the top-down Zelda formula with the idea of Zelda being playable, but also in a very different way, as opposed to Link, who would use a sword, a shield, and a bunch of different gadgets. It's Zelda with a staff that can conjure up and copy not only items, but also enemies and things around the world that you're exploring, which should lead to all kinds of really cool experiences with different puzzles. But based on some new information through way of the ESRB rating, it doesn't necessarily seem like Zelda would be the only character that would be playable in this game. And of course, this has led to all kinds of speculation. First, though, let's take a look at the post over on the ESRB website for this game. Go figure, it is rated at E10+. Not shocking there. It's not an M-rated game, so I guess Nintendo, they're going to take a shot at maybe with MEO, but in this case, yes, it is E10+, and we can see the rating here with the description. This is an adventure game in which players assume the role of Zelda as she attempts to dispel rifts throughout Hyrule and rescue Link. From a 3/4 overhead perspective, players explore various environments while fighting stylized enemies, e.g. humans, creatures. I mean, this all seems pretty straightforward, but then they say, as Link, players use a sword and arrows to defeat enemies. Zelda can use a magic wand to summon creatures like wind-up knights, pig soldier, slime for battle. And obviously that one line that says, as Link, players use a sword and arrows to defeat enemies, that's where the speculation starts, because up to this point we figured you're just going to play as Zelda. But the ESRB description says, no, you're also going to be playing as Link in the game. So now people are wondering, is this like a small section you're going to play as Link? Because that could happen at any time in the game. Maybe you're playing through the game and you're switching between Zelda, and then at times you go over to Link wherever he is, and maybe he has his own little side adventure. Or it could also just be the first 30 minutes or so of the game where you're playing as Link up until he gets sucked into that other world, and then you're just playing as Zelda. It's also possible that after the game ends, you maybe can play through the game again as Link in some way, or maybe at the end, there's a whole section where you play as Link after he's brought back from, again, whatever dimension he's been trapped in by Zelda, and there's a big like climactic ending with Zelda and Link finishing the game. But I will say, I wasn't expecting it all to play as Link, because I was just thinking this would be completely focused on Zelda, and that could still very well be the case for 95% of the game, and that's sort of what I'm leaning towards now, where you start the game as Link and then basically hand it off to Zelda for the rest of the game, maybe up until the credits or the ending scene. But still, something to keep an eye on here, because they have to describe what's in the game for it to warrant its rating of E10+, and a sword and arrows, and they even said setting people on fire. Well, that's going to get that 10+ rating along with the E, but we'll keep an eye out and see how much of the game you play as Link. Of course, I'm sure reviews will talk about it, and let's be real, most of these Nintendo games end up leaking early anyway, so that seems like something that would be a major spoiler, so we'll keep an eye out for that one too. Next up, let's talk about a major hack that has taken place, or at least is proclaimed to have taken place, because naturally a lot of the groups that do these hacks will tend to announce this stuff just to make sure people know in the first place. But this one is actually targeted at Disney. We can see this was posted up. This is over on HackRead. It says a self-proclaimed hacktivist group named No Bulge, which, okay, sure, aiming to protect artists' rights and ensure fair compensation for their work, claims to have breached Disney and leaked 1.1 terabyte or 1.2 terabytes of the company's internal Slack infrastructure. The breach, which is yet to be verified, allegedly contains a complete copy of the company's Slack communications used by their development team, including messages, files, and other data exchanged within the Slack workspace. The hackers further claim the dump includes almost 10,000 channels, every message and file possible, unreleased projects, raw images, code, logins, links to internal API web pages, and more. I feel like we heard this before with Slack for Rockstar. That's how a lot of that Grand Theft Auto 6 stuff got out there when it was in like pre-alpha. Things didn't even have textures. You saw AI descriptions firing off as the person was testing a scene in the game. So Slack seems to be at the center of many of these, because most of it ends up kind of being social engineering, figuring out a person's username and password, then logging in and staying logged in for a while because people don't notice you're there, and then you accumulate, as this says, 1.2 terabytes of messages and files and plans and roadmaps and a lot of stuff getting thrown around there in Slack that has the chance to be very damaging, we'll say, for Disney, depending on, the things being said behind the scenes and stuff, who knows there, but also plans for the future, maybe canceled projects, different things that change in development. There are a lot of things that Disney works on. So while we could talk about the games that they work to produce or at least license out, there's also stuff, of course, with movies, TV, or series at this point, Disney Plus, merchandise. So a lot could be coming out of this. But at this time, they're probably doing what we assume most do, which is basically shop it around, and I wouldn't assume that Disney would show up and pay any kind of ransom, because most of these companies say, all right, whatever, go ahead and release it, and we'll figure out data protection and privacy protection on our end with our employees and figure out exactly how they got into the Slack channel, and then have some kind of seminar for being able to make better passwords, or make sure people don't be able to guess or be able to take your password through different, again, social engineering tactics. But this is something that I definitely follow along with here, because we saw what happened when something like the Insomniac leak got thrown around. There was a lot of information that got out there from that, or again, Grand Theft Auto 6. So whenever I hear Slack come up, I just assume there is a lot of stuff that can come out from it. So we'll keep an eye on this and see if we all of a sudden get a bunch of information being dumped online from Disney. Next up, let's talk about an update for the next Crash Bandicoot game, just Crash 5, as well as a canceled project called Project Dragon. Now, this was stuff that was being shared over on Twitter X, as it seemed like just NDAs were being lifted on it. So anyone who had done artwork or character designs, they would just kind of post it up and sort of tell the story of different canceled projects that probably never got out of this, the conceptualization stage. But like, we can see this over on Insider Gaming, where they say there are images here that they have posted up as well for Project Dragon from Nicholas Cole. And they're a character, an illustrator for things like Crash 4. Well, this is Project Dragon, describing it as a cozy sandbox survival crafting multiplayer RPG, a buildable world made of blocks inspired by Minecraft and filled with fantasy characters and quests inspired by Breath of the Wild. Apparently, it's not to be confused with Spyro, by the way. They kind of mentioned that, dispelled those concerns, but alongside of that, they said, someday folks will hear about the Crash 5 that never was, and it's gonna break hearts. Yeah, so in this thread here over on Twitter X, they basically outlined two projects that were canceled, one being Project Dragon, the other one being Crash 5. And these are two, again, probably the pitch phase. It seemed like Project Dragon maybe a little further along because they had concept art and stuff. Although there could be some for Crash 5, as I figured that would have been pitched after, of course, Crash 4 came out. And we saw what happened with Toys for Bob, who would have been working on Crash 5, we assume. And we see what's going on right now with Microsoft, where Toys for Bob basically spun off from the Activision Blizzard sector, and they are now independently owned, and now they have a contract with Microsoft to work on something, but seems like it's not Crash 5 then. Maybe it's just a new IP. Still, though, that is unfortunate, obviously, for Crash fans who are hoping to hear about the next game in the series. I still think we're getting a Spyro game, because I feel like that was probably greenlit a while ago, and it's basically just about ready to be revealed and then eventually come out, obviously. But for Crash, the future seems very uncertain for that franchise at this time, with the kind of the direction Microsoft is going, and again, Toys for Bob spinning off of them now. And it's unfortunate because it is such a storied franchise that you feel like that would be an obvious one to point to as, okay, this adds variety to Game Pass. But if Microsoft doesn't have anyone to really make it anymore, with Toys for Bob now kind of off doing their own thing, and they of course see value in some of these other intellectual properties that are going to cost more and more money, like a Fallout, you can kind of see why Crash will kind of go by the wayside, and then Activision will once again probably be all hands on deck for the next few years of Call of Duty. So yeah, unfortunate stuff there. While Project Dragon would have been interesting to see what that would be. Obviously, having a new Crash game to look forward to would have been really, really fun for Crash Bandicoot fans, but seems like it's gonna be a while before we see anything there in that series again. I guess at the very least, the fact that they're mentioning that someday people will hear about Crash 5, and the fact that we see things like Digino Gaming and Liam Robertson usually will kind of dig into this stuff, maybe we'll at least figure out, or at least find out, what their direction or maybe their strategy and plans were for the next Crash game, because something like Crash 4, where they did a lot of like the time stuff, that was pretty cool. So I'm sure they had at least some idea and concept as to the direction they wanted for Crash 5. So maybe in a few years, we'll find out about that. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a new accessory for the GameCube, which this is really fun to see so many new accessories kind of blend modern hardware and technology with older technology from more than 20 years ago. We've seen it with the PS2, original Xbox, GameCube. That seems to be like a big generation right now that's being targeted with many of these accessories, like the memory cards with the little LCD screens, the ability to connect to your router and transfer saves back and forth that way. Really, really cool stuff. But now we're seeing more when it comes to connectivity for the GameCube. Like this, for example, this is the GCNet. It's a new GameCube network adapter, and it actually plugs in to your memory card slot, which is interesting. So usually you'd have the broadband adapter that would slot in on the bottom. If you look at the bottom of your GameCube, you have plastic tabs covering up multiple different areas and bays that you probably have not used, or if you do use it, it's probably for the Game Boy player, and it's never come back off of your GameCube because you wouldn't have used the others really. But now people are using it for things like SD cards, or they're also even using M.2 SSDs in that. Like, there's a lot of things that are being used currently, but having the Ethernet port being moved to the memory card slot means you can have that SD to SP2 functionality, and it works with all the different games that function for LAN play. And it's funny, they name them on the bottom, and I did forget that 1080 Avalanche Snowboarding did have LAN play, which is really cool, but it's already set up to work with something like Swiss that you would use for like a Pico boot, or you use with a Kunai, GameCube, Xeno GameCube loader, and so on. So really, really cool stuff. It already sold out. They say more inventory is on the way, but this is fun stuff. As more and more people are able to get access to Ethernet for their GameCube, you're going to see more and more projects when it comes to aftermarket mods for games, packs, different things to even add in multiplayer, as we are actually seeing that with certain Zelda games even. So really cool stuff. I'm going to try to pick one of these up. The only drawback that I see here is the fact that the Ethernet port is located on the front of the system, so it looks a little weird because your Ethernet cable is just going to plug into the front of it and you just have this cable hanging down. I wouldn't mind maybe seeing them slot it around with a right angle so it comes out of the side or the back, technically, of the GameCube then, but it's hard to complain when it's easy now to get technically a LAN out connection on your GameCube without having to go looking for that broadband adapter that has been quite expensive for a while. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, do you like Crash or Spyro more? I was curious because obviously they're both under Activision with Microsoft now, but they've always kind of been right next to each other. Almost like we get one game released in one series, then they move over to the other, then they go back to the other. And you can see Crash Bandicoot seems to have the lead here, 56%, with Spyro the Dragon at 44%. But it does seem like right now, I would expect a new Spyro game to be at next, and then who knows with the either franchise at that time going forward. Just trying to figure out where Microsoft's mind is currently with Game Pass, in which projects they would even consider greenlighting. It's hard to say. And of course, if they can find a studio that would be able to make either game right now. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Tanner, who says, having demos or betas locked behind a pre-order has to be the worst marketing strategy. Most craft breweries let you sample the beers before you decide on one. Yeah, when it comes to a demo or a beta being locked behind a pre-order, I don't think it really works well for a new IP, and this is when we were talking about Concord, because they just opened up the closed beta or the pre-order beta period to just anyone who has PlayStation Plus, because let's face it, pre-orders were probably low and they were just trying to get more people in to try out the game in the first place and stress their servers. But I think if you have an established intellectual property that people really want to play, like Call of Duty every single year, pre-order now, you'll get beta access. I'm sure that just causes a massive wave of pre-orders because people have been playing Call of Duty for now multiple decades, so they already know they like the game because it's basically the same game every year. Sure, I know there's different brands, switches between like a Black Ops or Modern Warfare, and you have different studios technically that work on them. It's still Call of Duty. You know you like the game. Or if Madden wants to do it every year, okay, yeah, sure, it's Madden. You know you're probably going to like the game. If you've liked the other Madden games and you want to get in early, probably try to get used to the game to get a competitive advantage. But when it's a brand new IP, it's a much harder sell, and we just saw that with Concord. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was the ESRB description for Echoes of Wisdom pointing to Link as a playable character? How big of a part of the game do you think that's going to really be? And then also, what about Disney and this major hack? Are you expecting all kinds of stuff to come out around that company? And then Crash 5, unfortunately, looks like it's been canceled. do you think there's any future, say, for the Crash franchise with Microsoft and Activision steering the ship? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.